Today, we're going to explore how we can transform habits, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that are no longer useful to us into thoughts, habits, and behaviors that empower us. In the Second Temple degree, the monographs define a habit. It states, a habit by definition corresponds to a physical or mental behavior that we repeat, often without being aware of it. So I'll say that again. A habit by definition corresponds to a physical or mental behavior that we repeat, often without being aware of it. From a mystical point of view, it originates in the voluntary repetition of an act whose execution becomes a law for the subconscious. So we don't even realize that we have created a habit, but our subconscious mind embraces it as a law, as a command to be carried out. When we begin a habit, we consciously order our subconscious to do something to satisfy a desire. For example, let's say many years ago, we came home from work, we were really tired, we may have felt overwhelmed, and we want some relief. So that day, we self-medicated with food, or we chose to do something that numbs our mind because we were just overwhelmed that day. We needed some relief from the intensity of that busy day. And I'm sure you can think of other things, other examples that help to create a habit. So this started one day. We didn't always watch television every night, or we didn't always overeat if that's a challenge for us, but it started in order to provide some kind of relief for us. And it can also start by, well, let's just stay with that. So it can provide a relief for us. Then through repetition, this order becomes a law that the subconscious mind obeys. In the beginning, it was only a conscious desire, but now it becomes an unconscious need because the subconscious acts on our behalf. It acts on what it thinks we want. So what are some examples of habits? First, we're going to look at some good habits. So I was able to put together 3 habits that I consider constructive. One is I make my bed every morning. No matter where I am, every morning I make my bed, and I feel like that helps me to set things in the right direction. Another habit that I consider healthy for me is that whenever I see stairs, I take them instead of taking an elevator so that I can get a little extra exercise in. And another habit that I consider healthy for me is that I meditate every morning. It's the very first thing that I do every day. And I don't proceed with my day except on very rare occasions when I would meditate later in the day, but I meditate every day. So we're going to open the chat now, and I'd like you to share what you consider are some healthy habits for you, some habits that you believe contribute to your well-being, to your health, to your tranquility. And I'm going to read a few of these off as you share. So if we can open the chat. Okay, so drinking more water, journal each night before bedtime. I walk in a garden every day, prayer, exercise, more drinking water. I watch my thoughts, Qigong and Tai Chi, meditation. I read every day, working out. Wow, you all have a lot of very healthy habits. Fantastic. Getting fresh air, do something creative, more Tai Chi and Qigong. nature bath, play music, continuing education, Rosicrucian exercises, kiss my dog. Oh, that one gets extra credit. Record your dreams. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing those, and you're welcome to continue to share. And now let's consider some habits that may not be quite so helpful to us. And I'm going to include a few here that are from this monograph that talks about habits, just to get us started. Some physical habits could be social smoking. You know, we get in a certain environment and feel the need to light a cigarette or to drink alcohol when we may not normally do that, or maybe to drink more alcohol than we normally do, and that may not be healthy to us. Overeating when we're stressed. The monograph also talks about mental habits, and it gives the example that when people stop themselves from criticizing what they see or hear, they stop themselves from gossiping, it's because they have formed the habit of doing so, and their subconscious responds to that mental need. So those people have commanded their subconscious not to engage in those behaviors. Ralph Lewis wrote that when people don't have all the information that we need, our mind naturally fills in the blanks. So we can form a new habit to pause before we fill in the blanks. We don't like that. We like to have closure. We like to know what's going on. And when we don't have that, our mind starts filling in the blanks, but it doesn't have the information. So it's filling in with stuff that we've made up. So we can form a new habit to pause before we fill those blanks in our mind. So now I'm going to share some of what you all have shared in the chat. And so now let's share habits that are not contributing to your well-being, but you still find yourself doing that sometimes. So we have speaking poorly about oneself, to have a drink if I'm not otherwise busy is a bad habit of mine, someone wrote. Biting my nails, overthinking, overeating and eating at the wrong time, spending time on social media. I think probably almost everyone could put that one down. Gossiping, negative thoughts and overeating. News consumption. It's another one that I think many people don't even realize that we've been conditioned. There are experts in the field of understanding our habits and behavior and preferences. And some of these experts use that information to take advantage of us and to draw us in more and more. They know what our habits are. They know what will draw us in. Here are some other habits that aren't helpful to us: daydreaming or mind wandering, bad relationships, procrastinating, not saying no enough, avoiding helpful behavior. So please feel free to continue to add information there if you like. And I'm going to share a little bit about some of the things that we can do. We can transform habits that are not helpful to us. And again, our habits lead directly to our behavior. We can transform these by reviewing our day and being aware of when that behavior or that habit occurred, because most of our habits are unconscious to us. Much of what we do throughout the day is habitual. Experts have researched, it seems, based on the research, that between 80 and 90% of the thoughts that we have today were the same thoughts that we had yesterday. That we are not having as many novel thoughts and experiences as we may believe that we are. And we can also celebrate not only when we change a habit, but we can celebrate just when we recognize that we are acting habitually. Just stop and say, wow, even though I just did that again, at least this time I recognized it. We can also create what's called an activation trigger. And the best example I've ever heard of this is someone who wants to work out in the morning, but you know how it is when you wake up and it's cold or you're tired or whatever it is. So a good example of an activation trigger is to sleep in your workout clothes. So then it's easier when you get up to go ahead and work out than it is to change into something else and not work out. There are actually research labs that are called habit labs. The University of Southern California has a habit lab that has really produced some exceptional material to help people. Also, the habit lab at Stanford University has produced an app to help people spend less time online. So it includes many tools. It includes news feed blockers. You know, sometimes we get news feeds, well, at least I do, and I'm like, I never signed up for that. I don't even know where this came from, and I don't know how to turn it off. And there are times that we do say, oh yeah, I'd like to get more information from this organization. And then these news feeds program us. So Stanford has the Habit Lab allows us to track our habits and to find ways to reduce our time online. And one example is through their app, you can pick websites that you want to spend less time on. So if you find that you are continually going to a particular news website, you can put that in this app and it will remind you, you know, you said you didn't want to go to this website as much anymore. Or you could do the same thing with Facebook or anywhere where you go down the rabbit hole. You know how that can be. And sometimes this is a psychological, even it's an emotional and physical thing. Maybe we're feeling overwhelmed or we've hit a dead end with something we researched. So it feels good to click and click and click and click. But then you look up and it's been an hour or two that you just totally wasted. Or I should say that I just totally wasted. I can speak for myself. Wendy Wood and David Neal have written an article called Healthy Through Habit, Interventions for Initiating and Maintaining Healthy Behavior and Change. And they present this data in order to help people understand what they can do so that their change sticks. Because often we have goals and we really believe we want to do a certain thing, but then we don't do it. And we're going to explore this in a minute. So what these two authors, Wendy Wood and David Neal, have shared is that people are most likely to make healthy choices when decisions are structured to make that choice easy, when other people are making the same choice, and then by making plans. If I do this, it will lead to that. It's not enough just to set goals. There's been so much research on people who will start a diet, for example, to lose weight, and they may lose the weight, but it won't stay off. And there are researchers who show the reason for this. The three main habit-breaking interventions that we can use are cue disruption, environmental engineering, and monitoring our inhibition. Cue disruption happens when we change our environment. For example, when we move, this is a great time to break a habit that's not healthy for us anymore and to start a new habit. Or if we start a new job or any of life's transitions, even if we go on vacation or visit a novel place. So some ways that people are trying to help others and not just take advantage by knowing what our habits are and then making money off of that. There are organizations that use this knowledge about our habits to create healthier environments and structures. Some examples are in certain cities, when someone moves, when it's a person who's recently moved, they offer public transit price reductions or free public transportation. This person has gone into a new environment. They may have wanted to take public transportation when they were in their old place, but it was so easy to keep doing the same thing. But they offer price reductions for recent movers. And the effectiveness, I got it, is about double when this is presented to new movers instead of people who've lived in the community for a while. Also, employers can offer employees health and wellness programs for new employees. When someone is a new employee, they're much more likely to embrace a new habit. Or first-time parent incentives. There are hospitals and other organizations that offer incentives for new parents who have this new life experience for them to start something new, maybe creating healthy meals for the whole family. The second thing that's recommended in this article is environmental engineering, and it's suggested to add friction to unhealthy behaviors. A good example of this is banning smoking in public places. So you make it difficult to do something that's unhealthy. And you can also do the opposite. So you can, when engineers are building a building, they can design the building so that stairs are more prominent than elevators. So that when you walk in, the stairs are right there, but you have to go looking for the elevator. Or some supermarkets offer a fast lane checkout line for people who buy healthy food. And some cafeterias do that too. So you can set up the environment to support healthy choices. And then the third area that the authors mentioned is monitoring or inhibition. And this right on a package showing the labeling information, what's in the package that you're buying. Or if you've ever seen a pack of cigarettes, it couldn't be more clear, this smoking cigarettes kills. Also, there are wearable devices that deliver a nudge to adopt healthful behavior. So there are smartwatches and other devices that can remind you to do certain things. Ridding oneself of unhealthy habits requires neutralizing the context cues that automatically trigger habit performance. So we have to either remove ourselves from those cues that trigger us, again, like social drinking. We may not drink too much other times, but when we're around, when we're in a certain atmosphere, we drink or smoke more than is healthy for us. And there's also been a lot of research on the challenges that formerly incarcerated people experience when they go back to the same home environment and the same friends. So even though they may have changed their habits while they were incarcerated, when they get back to that old environment, it's extremely challenging to not go back into those old habits. Our monographs share two types of will. You are here today on this teleconference because you arranged to do so. That is one type of will. But something inspired you to do that. And that's the other type of will. There is an unconscious impulse that inspired you, well, maybe I'll go to the Department of Instruction teleconference day. And then there's the first kind of will that I mentioned, that we made plans to be here. So you made sure you were by a computer and that you had enough time to log in. So those are the two types of will. And the monograph that addresses will says that when we have a lack of will, or when it's challenging for us to apply our will, it's either because the subconscious impulses is not strong enough to cross the threshold of the objective mind. So it's not going to lead to a voluntary action on our part. So the impulse to get us to do something is not strong enough. Or the other option is the message gets through, but our objective mind doesn't want to hear it. It is judging that there is no reason to take that urge into account. And the example that's used in the monograph is that we may have felt the desire to study a monograph, but haven't done so, even when we had the time, even when we had a perfectly good sanctum right there that we could have gone to, but we chose not to. The urge came, but we ignored it. And the monograph discussing this subject says, you are the one who, for more or less valid reasons, chose not to study your monographs, which is like saying that you placed yourself in opposition to your inner self. And of course, there are many examples of this. Now, why would we do that? Why would we get an inner impulse and then choose not to follow it? It's because we have multiple personalities that compete with each other. In psychology, these are called mental modules. And we have these different cells programmed into our neural networks. Our brains are actually wired as different cells. And we've talked about this on other teleconferences. An example for me is that I have a self that is a daughter. I have a self that is a sister, a friend, a hiker, a person who relaxes. I have a Rosicrucian self. I wasn't born, that self wasn't with me when I was born. I wasn't a Rosicrucian when I was born, but my brain wired that self into me with every Rosicrucian experience. So you can imagine if we have all these different selves, these different mental modules that are created when we have an experience, we will create networks in our brain of everything around the sight, the smell, the feel, the taste, the touch, and that becomes that experience. And then that grows into, like I said, an experience of being a Rosicrucian or an American or a woman. So the reason that there are times that we get an inner urge, but we don't follow it, is because there's some aspect of ourself that thinks it's better not to. And we can observe these different selves. We can see ourselves clearly, but we have to admit that we have these different selves. And it's challenging because often we're embarrassed by certain selves. We don't want other people to see them. This is referred to as our shadow side in some traditions. So we pretend it's not there, and then it just acts out until we finally give it attention. So there is something within us that puts these different selves into action. And being a baseball fan, I can relate to a coach who puts different players in the game. And the coach might think, okay, today the best person for what Julie is dealing with, the best self to have in the game is understanding and kindness. But let's say I feel some kind of a threat, or I am uncomfortable. Then that coach is going to put a different self in the game, because the coach is protecting Julie and wants to make sure that whatever self is in the game is the one to do that. We can talk to the coach and ask why the coach put that particular player in Julie's game today. And we can understand what we may call a bad habit is really the coach putting a self in the game because it felt that my person, Julie, needed to feel safe or needed comfort or needed to be cared for. So the coach put somebody different in the game rather than an urge I may have felt to be understanding and compassionate that day. We're such complicated creatures, aren't we? This is going on all the time. We are activating different selves all the time. And we're going to practice this now. You're going to practice talking to the self that's in the game. So choose a recent situation where you may not have behaved in the way that best reflects your ideals. So just think of a time where you're like, maybe I overreacted, or I'm surprised I acted that way. And now move your body just a little bit and ask to speak to whatever put that part of yourself in the game. It can be a coach, it can be a CEO, it can be the controller. Ask to speak to whatever made that decision. And say, who was in the game that day? Who did you put in the game that day? The coach knows exactly who the coach put in the game. So maybe the coach says to you, I put fear in the game, or I put anger in the game, or I put withdrawal in the game. Now move your body again slightly and ask to speak to that aspect of yourself. So ask to speak to fear or anger or withdrawal. And now ask that aspect of yourself why it behaved that way in that situation that you're thinking of. And don't ask for yourself. Act as though a third person. Like for me, I would say, what was fear doing in Julie's life that day? What was anger doing in Julie's life that day? Talk to your fear or your anger or whatever that aspect was. No matter what aspect you spoke to, it provided a similar answer. If you met fear, if fear was in the game that day, and you say, why did you fear? Why did you act that way with Julie? Fear is going to say, because I'm fear. Because the coach asked me to get off the bench and in the game, the coach thought fear was needed then. So we don't need to feel ashamed or embarrassed because fear was in. Some aspect thought fear was called for in that moment, or anger was called for. So now move your body a little bit again. Just shift a little bit and go back to the coach and ask the coach, instead of whatever you put in that day, whatever player you put in the game that day, could you have put a different player in for Julie that day? So let's say there was a situation and the coach put anger in. I behaved in an angry manner. I could say to the coach, could you have put irritation in? Was full-blown anger needed? Or could you have just put irritation or annoyance in the game, would that still have protected our person, Julie? So we always have this option. Anytime something comes up, an old habit or emotions that aren't serving us, the value is in observing it. Because if we pretend, if we're embarrassed about it, we pretend it didn't happen, we didn't see it, that habit, that emotion, that thought will continue forever and will act out even more. So the monographs also share that to transform a bad habit or a habit that's not healthy for us into a healthy habit, we need to order our subconscious to substitute a positive law for the negative law it had been obeying. So we're talking to our subconscious mind. Remember, all our subconscious mind wants to do is what it thinks it's been ordered to do. Anytime we have what the monographs call autosuggestion, it must be positive. For example, subconscious, remind me of such and such a thing. Not subconscious, don't forget. So it's positive. Instead of saying, subconscious, remind me not to be proud, we would say, subconscious, show me how to be humble. So the subconscious is just hearing what we say. Don't say it in the negative. A lot of research has been done on the subconscious picking up messages like if someone says to themselves, oh, I wish I wasn't so fat, or I wish I wasn't dumb, or I wish I wasn't so plain. Instead, so what the subconscious hears is fat or dumb or plain. When we speak to the subconscious, we use the positive. So, subconscious, help me to become fit. Subconscious, help me so that my thoughts are sharp. Subconscious, help bring the beauty out in me. So we're going to practice a meditation now. And before we do this, I want you to one habit, behavior, or emotion that you want to change. One habit, behavior, or emotion that you want to change. Just one. Now, in your mind's eye, focus on this so intensely that it cannot go by unnoticed in the future. Be really clear about what this looks like, even if you find it embarrassing or unattractive. See this occurring and you are on it. So you are, of course, not visualizing more of this happening. You are visualizing right now that you are perfectly aware of when this habit occurs. So what we're visualizing is your awareness. We're visualizing that you are aware when this habit is occurring. This habit that no longer serves you, you are seeing yourself in a moment. You can start with the past seeing it and then see yourself in the future. Whoops, I did that again. So see yourself sometime in the future and you see yourself doing this thing that isn't helpful to you anymore, and pat yourself on the back because you were aware of it. Even if you did not change, you were aware of this habit. So in your mind's eye, pat yourself on the back. You saw it. You are no longer blind to this. This habit, this emotion, this behavior that is no longer serving you is perfectly clear to you now. You know when it's happening. It's no longer hidden. You know there was a good reason for you doing it at some point. Maybe when you were a child, this was effective behavior. Or maybe when you were in a more threatening situation. The coach put that aspect of yourself in the game for a good reason, but the environment's different now. So open your eyes for a minute because we're going to make a shift, move around a little bit. Now we're going to focus on a habit, a behavior, a thought, or an emotion that you want to embrace, that will support radiant health and happiness and peace profound for you. If you have a piece of paper or some other way to write it down, just write down a word. Just one. We're just doing one. Now, mentally rehearse yourself establishing this habit or this thought or this behavior or this emotion, behaving in this way, thinking this thought, or feeling this emotion. Mentally rehearse this. See yourself in a future situation in your mind's eye where you have become this. Maybe you see yourself facing a challenge and you are rising to the occasion. Now imagine another situation where you successfully have established this habit, where you are behaving this way, where you are thinking this thought or feeling this emotion. So you're imagining a second situation in the future. We're going to do this one more time, and this time choose a situation that you know will be challenging. Maybe it's somebody who really pushes your buttons. Or maybe it's when you're driving. That's always challenging. So you're visualizing a third situation in which you have established this habit. You're behaving this way, you're thinking this thought or feeling this emotion. Really feel it in your body. Wherever you're feeling this in your body, place your hands on that place. So that you can recall this feeling later. Now, really feeling this, and with your hands placed on that part of your body, so you can recall the feeling later, we're going to intone the vowel sound Om 3 times. Ready? Inhale. Now tug on your earlobes. Just give them a little tug down. This is a direct connection with your vagus nerve and your autonomic nervous system, just really programming your whole system to that new state of being. Now take a deep breath. You can let go of your earlobes. Take a deep breath, and while exhaling, transmit this new habit, behavior, thought, or emotion mentally to your subconscious. Visualizing your subconscious as a double of yourself. So you can say, subconscious, establish in me this habit, and say what it is, or this behavior, or this thought, or this emotion. Do that 3 times. Say the word subconscious. You are commanding, you are giving an order. Subconscious, get its attention. If you're able to, say this out loud. Subconscious. If it is the will of the cosmic, it is done. So mote it be.